A very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Lord, and in our news, the IMF begins its assessment process ahead of Barbados' next drawdown. The CDB concerned about the amount of undispersed funds it still holds. The UK expands its diplomatic network in the region. And in sports, the Windies whip Afghanistan in India.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
In our top story, head of the International Monetary Fund's Barbados delegation and Deputy Division Chief for the Caribbean region, Bert Van Selm, says Barbados continues to meet its targets under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation, or BERT program. Mr. Van Selm made the comments during an event to release the IMF's Regional Economic Outlook for the Western Hemisphere at the Courtney Blackman Grand Salle of the Central Bank. He says a team of IMF officials arrived on island in recent days and officially started their assessment process yesterday.
As usual, we're going to be here for 2 weeks to do our work, to discuss with the government of Barbados how things are going, whether there are a need for adjustments. The numbers we've seen so far are looking pretty good on the fiscal side. The adjustment seems to be coming along as planned. But I need to hedge a little bit here because I will do a press event also at the end of the mission. So that's on Friday, hopefully, of next week, where I can give you a more full picture.
Mr. Van Selm says following that assessment, the IMF's board would then make the official determination next month ahead of the next scheduled drawdown of funds, which is also set for December. He also shared some of the important economic figures that have reflected Barbados' economic turnaround, noting that the fund is projecting growth of 0.6% for the island next year.
On the fiscal side, we've seen a major improvement over the last year or two. As you will be aware, the government of Barbados targets a primary surplus of 6% of GDP to be achieved this year and subsequent years. From what we've seen in fiscal data this year so far, they are on track to achieve that. The fiscal adjustment, if you look at the overall balance, which is what, including interest payments, which is what the left-hand panel does, shows even more improvement. And that, of course, is driven by the debt restructuring, because the debt restructuring has led to a major cut in interest payments, both on the domestic side and now also on the external side for the government of Barbados. So that has played an important role in the adjustment process.
President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Warren Smith, has lamented the fact that the bank continues to hold tens of millions of dollars in undispersed funds in its coffers. He says poor rates of implementation and weak implementation capacity within some borrowing member countries are the chief reasons for this situation. He also made the comments at the 2019 Caribbean Forum on Regional Transformation at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center.
Growing buckets of undisbursed balances on our books keep me awake at night. It is cold comfort that other development partners are facing a similar challenge. Bear in mind that none of us are delivering on our development mandate if the funds intended for these countries remain in our coffers. Our goal should be for the intended beneficiaries to be able to access these resources for high-priority development projects as quickly as possible.
Well, Dr. Smith adds that the CDB has had to overhaul its systems to meet the implementation challenges being observed through a number of measures that include a new procurement framework and training. Well, Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley says she's cautiously optimistic about the future of Barbados. Speaking during a high-level panel discussion on the Caribbean in a changing geopolitical environment and the future of multilateralism this evening at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center, Ms. Motley said Barbados must have a singular focus on growth.
That we can get our debt to GDP target of 60% by 2032 or way before, by growing our economy or by slavishly just trying to be playing cautiously within the crease. If you come from a nation that has produced the greatest cricketer the world has ever seen, then you have to learn to play outside of the crease and to play some shots. And we are about to play some shots in the country. And those shots hopefully will lead to the kind of growth that we need. They will also make Barbados a more hospitable place.
Prime Minister Motley told the Caribbean Forum that in making decisions, the region cannot afford to be politically yoked.
We in the Caribbean treat to each other at the level of heads. We can resolve things. But then we are forced to treat with bureaucrats outside of the region, who will then tell you that they are not in a position to make decisions because it is a political matter of a very high nature. Sovereign nations are sovereign nations, and we have to be able to return the discussion and to locate the debate within the context of equals. The absence of equals is what is imposing on us greater difficulties than would otherwise exist.
Barbadians should gain a greater understanding of exactly what the blue economy is by the end of this week. Shane Jones tells us more.
Bluefest 2019 is a week which aims to define what the blue economy means for Barbados. Through its activities, Barbadians will hear what the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the blue economy does and become more exposed to its work. Permanent Secretary in the ministry, Ezworth Reed, says while there are many versions of what the blue economy is supposed to be, the recurring theme is that of the sustainable use of the ocean's resources for economic growth.
The ministry has set about implementing a regime for the governance of the marine space and resources in an effort to ensure sustainability and resilience, and a reduction in the vulnerability to environmental threats, while facilitating economic growth and social development.
Minister Kirk Humphrey expanded on the role the blue economy will play.
The blue economy is essentially about reducing poverty. It is essentially about creating new jobs. It is essentially about expanding the old jobs, those traditional sectors that we always knew, and to make sure that everybody has a say and a share in this economy. It is about gender equity too, because we want to make sure that as we create these new jobs, that it doesn't serve to perpetuate existing discriminatory practices, so that everybody has a chance to benefit as we attempt to build out this new economy.
Minister Humphrey says Barbadians have a perfect moment to make a difference in the lives of many and stressed that there are things they can simply no longer do.
When we implemented the ban on single-use plastics, it wasn't because we were trying to stop people from drinking out of a plastic cup or having their food in a styrofoam container. It was a much bigger perspective that we took. And that was all part of our idea of saying we must protect the ocean, but we must also protect those things that at the end of the day, they can't renew themselves, you know? And if that is not our charge in this lifetime, then what is climate change for us has to be the single most important event of our time. And that the Ministry of Maritime Affairs has a major role to, and the economy has a major role to play in addressing some of these ills.
Tejon Cadogan and Shakem Springer were honored by the ministry for excelling in their course at the SJPI. Shane Jones, CBC News.